All right, so I'm live. I'm here on my own. Just going to do a little quick meta episode responding to Dr. Satan. I interviewed him recently, and he had some questions about causality. He didn't seem to understand when I talked about per se causality and essentially ordered causality. So we got into it a little bit in the YouTube chat, and I tried to tell him that this is not the time and the place to have a protracted philosophical discussion, that he should book the live stream and we'll talk man to man, face to face, like human beings, not hiding behind our keyboards and doing protracted uh, conversations via the comment section. I don't do that. And it's not the way, that's not the way I operate. Okay. Anyway, he kept saying he's going to book it, but he eventually just said, well, because you're not answering my question, I'm not going to come and talk to you. So that's his choice. I think it's lame. But I told him I'm going to do an episode, a meta episode explaining causality and in overview, and reading his arguments, which I only barely skimmed because I'm not going to dedicate time and energy to entering into a protracted philosophical debate on the comment section. Okay, let's dive into it. This is his first comment. He says, "This is what Chat GPT has to say on the matter." Like I care, as if I care what some regurgitated hodgepodge text says. Why don't you tell me what you think, Dr. Satan? Why don't you use your brain and think about causality? Take some time and think about it. Why are you relying on this demonic, man-made, godless composer, text composer, which just puts together likely sounding phrases? Why? What's the purpose? It's not a substitute for deep thought and reflection. Okay. Anyway, that being said, let's continue with his comment. It's a rather long comment. This is what ChatGPT has to say on the matter. And then his question, I guess. He doesn't use punctuation for some reason. Dr. Satan doesn't like punctuation. Is causality in physics the same as logical sequence, entailment? Well, that's an irrelevant question. Of course, it's not the same thing. Why are you asking that to ChatGPT? That's not. Did I say that during our interview? No, I did not say that. I never said that. Second question: can physics causality work without time? Can logical sequence work without time? And then the answer to those three questions, ChatGPT says, causality in physics and logical sequence, although related, are not exactly the same concept, obviously. Let's examine each question separately. Is causality in physics the same as logical sequence, entailment? Question mark. And the answer that GPT gives is, causality in physics refers to the relationship between cause and effect, where a cause precedes an effect in time. Well, that's not the only type of causality. This machine is telling you about accidental causality and accidentally ordered causality. It's not talking about per se causality. It's talking about not immediate causality, but that causality which is mediated in time. So this is crappy. When you submit something to AI, there's always a feedback thing. Was this good, medium, bad? And you can give feedback. I'd give this one horrible. This is horrible. Causes never follow the effect, but they can be simultaneous with the effect, and all per se causality is simultaneous with the effect. Where a cause precedes an effect in time, it is fundamental. It is a fundamental principle that states that an event cannot occur before its cause. That is true. Never before, but it can occur. An event can occur after its cause, and it always, it usually does. But there's also a simultaneous causality, which ChatGPT is not addressing. This principle is often expressed through the statement, cause precedes effect. Well, there's also a logical precedence in the essentially ordered series of causality, where you've got a hierarchy in that one moment of time, the simultaneous sequence of causes and effects. There's a logical sequence, and the cause is always more perfect than the effect. This is the principle of proportionate causality. You can't give what you don't have. This principle, ChatGPT continues, this principle is often expressed through the statement, cause precedes effect. Causality in physics involves understanding the mechanisms and laws governing physical phenomena. Yeah, but if you do statics, if you look at statics, it's not talking about accidental causality or accidentally ordered causality. If you look at statics, it's talking about force vectors and all these sorts of things that are in the moment. That's per se causality. Go pick up a physics textbook and you'll learn about statics, which is sub-branch of mechanics. This principle is often expressed as on the other hand, logical sequence or entailment refers to the logical relationship between statements or propositions. Well, I'm not talking about statements or propositions. When I'm talking about essentially ordered series of causes and effects, I'm talking not about ideas in our head, I'm talking about physical mechanics and statics in particular. What are the vectors at play? Freeze time and look at what are the vectors, right? What are the force vectors and all these sorts of things. It deals with the connection between premises and conclusions, where if the premises are true, the conclusion logically follows. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Logical sequence does not necessarily where am I losing myself here? Logical sequence does not necessarily involve a temporal aspect, as it focuses on the logical validity of the arguments or propositions. Yeah, but who cares? It's not what I was talking about. While there can be connections between causality and logical sequence, they are distinct concepts. Causality deals with the temporal something between events, while logical sequence focuses on the logical connection between statements. You see how this ChatGPT just repeats, and it's not deep, it's shallow, and it's just putting words together that it feels, not feels, but that it's programmed to notice patterns and put these things together that are supposed to sound good together. Can physics causality work without time? No. Causality in physics relies on the concept of time. Well, we're spatio-temporal creatures. Physics, the word physics means nature. Nature is spatio-temporal. So is physics spatio-temporal? Yes. Is God spatio-temporal? No. Is God the first efficient cause of every chain of cause and effect in the essentially ordered series? Yes. Okay, we're going to get to this. We're going to unravel that. So obviously, physics can't work without time because nature doesn't work without time. Nature is spatio-temporal. It's the nature of nature to be temporal. It's stupid. It's a very stupid waste of time, this GPT chat. No, causality in physics. In the framework of classical physics, causality is intimately connected to the concept of time order. It asserts that a cause must precede the effect in time. Not true. The effect can never precede the cause, but the cause and the effect can be simultaneous. For example, if a billiard ball collides with another ball and causes it to move, the collision cause must occur before the second ball's motion, the effect. Yeah, absolutely. But when we do an analysis, a statics analysis of any given moment on that billiard table, we will freeze time and we will look at the vectors and what's coming into contact with what, and what are the deformations of the bodies, because these are not rigid bodies. We could treat them as rigid bodies in certain context, but yeah, then you have other problems with infinite acceleration and these infinite forces and these sorts of things. In the realm of relativistic physics, causality is still dependent on time, but the concept of time becomes more intertwined with space. Relativity considers the space-time continuum, where the geometry of space-time affects the causal relationships between events. Nevertheless, the basic notion of cause preceding effect in time remains. No, this ChatGPT is moronic. Can logical sequence work without time? Yes, logical sequence can work without time, but I've never brought that up. Logical sequence. I'm not talking about logical sequence in terms of what ChatGPT is addressing with premises and conclusions. I'm not talking about that. Logical relationships between statements or propositions, which is what I'm not talking about, are independent of time, irrelevant. The validity of logical arguments is based on the logical connections between premises and conclusions, regardless of any temporal considerations. Logical sequence operates within the realm of abstract reasoning and inference, where the focus is on the logical structure of arguments. Exactly. I never brought this up. It's not part of the conversation about causality. I'm talking about physical causality. It doesn't require a temporal dimension to establish a logical visit. It's just repeating itself here. In summary, while causality and physics and logical sequence share certain similarities, they're distinct concepts. Of course, causality relies on the temporal. It's just repeating itself here again, whereas logical sequence is concerned with the logical connections between propositions or statements. Physics causality requires time for its operation, whereas logical sequence can function independently of time, which only serves to... And then, okay, so that's the end of ChatGPT. And then Dr. Satan says, which only serves to reaffirm my argument in the video. You have no logical basis upon which to claim that time was caused to exist, as it cannot be established that time exists beyond the universe in which for an action to give rise to an effect. Okay, well, I never said that... This is just nonsense. I never once said that time exists beyond the universe. I never said that. Time does not exist beyond the temporal universe. It doesn't. I never said that. So you're fighting a straw man here, my friend. You have no logical basis on which to claim that time was caused to exist. Well, yeah, I do have a logical basis for claiming that time was caused to exist. I do. It's called God. It's the uncaused first cause, who is atemporal. Okay. My response to that nonsense, that wall of text, was time exists, but per se causality is always simultaneous. We'll discuss it when you come on a live stream. Book it at your earliest convenience. Hint, hint. I don't do protracted discussions in the comments section. By the way, I just reformatted it to make it more easy to read. Just because the comments I find annoying the way they collapse automatically and these sorts of things. He says, I'll get around to it eventually, booking the live stream, that is. But first, cite something that I can read to learn more about per se causality. As far as I've found, there is no such thing. Oh, yeah? Per se causes are coincidental and per accident causes are not. If that isn't what you're talking about, then I'll need more information. Yeah, per se causes are coincidental. Yeah, they coincide. They're simultaneous. And per accidens causes are mediated in time, right? But those per accidens causes populate each and every essentially ordered series of causality. Now, there is a first essential cause in each and every essentially ordered series of causality, which is not a per accidens cause, an accidental cause, and that is God. But generally speaking, every other cause in any essentially ordered sequence, that cause, which belongs to essentially ordered series, also belongs to accidental chains of causality, obviously, because we are in time. And when I cause something now, that is one essentially ordered series. And then when I cause something now, a bit later, that is a part of another separate essentially ordered series of causality. But I am one and the same person flowing through time and causing multiple things at different points in time. So obviously there's an accidental component that's present in every slice of time, in every essentially ordered series. So my response to Dr. Satan is a reiteration. Per se causality is just causality that is not mediated in time. That's not hard to grasp. Wrap your head around that. It's not hard to grasp. Accidental causality is mediated in time, and so it is not immediate. It's mediated, so it's not immediate. Immediate means not mediated. And we can and must bracket out all of this loose causality in the loose sense of the term causality. We must bracket it out when analyzing per se causality. Pick up a book on mechanics and look at the chapter on statics, and you'll understand exactly what I mean. Dr. Satan says, so per se causes exist purely outside of time and yet have effect on things in time? No, I just told you that I'm the same guy moving through time when I cause now and now and now and now and now, and all these essentially ordered series which are simultaneous. All of the effects in each and every one of those is also part of a horizontal dimension with the accidental series of causality. The accidental causality on the horizontal, the temporal, it's mediated in time, but each one of those causes and effects is also participating in one or more essentially ordered series, which is simultaneous. So they're both happening at once. I've tried to explain this to you several times, and you just need to go away and think about it. So Dr. Satan continues, and he says, provide one example of a cause outside of time. Well, there's only one example. It's God, that has an effect within. You said causality not mediated in time, and causality in physics relates to an action in time which precedes an effect in time. Well, you're relying on what you learned from ChatGPT, which was wrong. It doesn't always precede. In accidentally, it precedes it. In accidental causality, it precedes, but in essential causality, per se causality, it may proceed logically, but not temporally. Or are you talking about logical sequence? Well, there's a logical hierarchy in every essentially ordered series of causality. There is a logical hierarchy, but I'm not talking about logical sequence like your ChatGPT told you. ChatGPT muddied the waters by introducing something that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about laboratory, hard science, physics, doing experiments, masses, forces, and basic mechanics and statics. Okay, so we don't need to bring premises and conclusions into this discussion. It's not part of the discussion. We're talking about physics. We're talking about hard science. He gives an example here. Larry is not married, therefore he is a bachelor. Larry is not caused to be a bachelor. Yeah, why are you bringing in these why are you bringing this in? Because ChatGPT told you that that's the only alternative to the world of hard science and physics, where, according to ChatGPT, the cause always precedes in time the effect, which is wrong. That's wrong. ChatGPT is wrong. Sorry. I respond with this protracted example. I say, picture thousands of soldiers, each with a mass of 90 kilograms, for example, just to keep it simplified, marching in tight single file, to keep it simplified. They have to cross a calm river using a rope bridge that touches the water of the river below. Under the weight of a certain number of soldiers, it touches the water, but does not touch the water when not filled with that sufficient number of soldiers. So basically, the basic idea is here, I'm setting it up so that we've got movement of masses across a flexible bridge, which will touch the water when a sufficient number, a certain mass is on it, but which will rise again when that mass is reduced sufficiently. From the moment the rope bridge is sufficiently filled with soldier, it touches the water below and remains in contact with the water until those at the very tail end of the line make their way across the rope bridge. Now consider that long period of time between the first moment the bridge touches the water and the last moment before it lifts out of contact with the water in that scene that I described. We live in a spatio-temporal universe, and this is a spatio-temporal situation I have outlined. I'm not talking about abstractions like Larry is a bachelor. But at any given moment in time, we can and must consider only the atemporal per se causality that is currently at work. Again, pick up a book on physics, mechanics, statics. So when we ask at a given time, what is causing the rope bridge to touch the water at that time? The answer can and must consider only the mass of those soldiers who are currently on the bridge. Doesn't matter what came before. It doesn't matter what's coming. It only matters what's the mass now, what is the deformation of this bridge that allows it to touch the water, and that's it. You're just looking at the vectors at that moment, and the past and the future do not exist. In our analysis, it is as if those who crossed the bridge in the past do not even exist, and those who will cross the bridge in the future do not exist either. We only consider the soldiers who are currently on the bridge, because it is their mass that is the cause. I hope this helps. We will hash it out on the live stream. Book it at your earliest convenience. Hint, hint, hint. He responds, that was a per accidens cause. No, we bracketed out the per accidens causes. We bracketed those out. They're irrelevant to our statics analysis. That's why we said it's like they don't exist. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. All those thousands of soldiers that already trudged across, we can and must ignore them. All that accidental causality, we have to ignore it because they're not the cause in the moment. Okay, now you could say, well, Billy pushed Johnny and Fred pushed Billy or whatever to get everyone across the bridge. It was like a motivational thing. It's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. I don't care how this particular set of soldiers got on the bridge. It's irrelevant. The history of each soldier is completely irrelevant. If your mass is on the bridge, you are contributing to that deformation, which will or will not allow the bridge to touch the water. And when we do an analysis, when the bridge is touching the water, we're going to look for the cause, and the cause will be that particular set of soldiers that are on the bridge at this current time. So Dr. Satan says that was a per accidens cause. Wrong. It's full of per accident causes. If you want to look at the accidental causes, we could tell the story about little Jimmy, what he had for breakfast that morning, how scared he was to go to war. And we could tell all the stories of the accidental causes. We could tell all those stories. They're completely irrelevant. It was not a coincidence that the bridge lowered as they got on. Yeah, I know it wasn't a coincidence, but when we look at the cause at any given moment, it's a simultaneous chain of causes and effects that are in that moment causing that bridge to touch that water, period. That example was within time. Yeah, it was within time, but we bracket out time. That's my whole point. These men stepped on the bridge, time passed on the bridge, lowered as a result. Yeah, we know that. But at any given time, the bridge was or was not touching the water, and the cause for that will be dependent on that, who's on the bridge at that particular time, how much mass is on the bridge at that particular time, the flexibility of the bridge, etc., and so on. We do an analysis as if time didn't exist. There always, if there was no time, I didn't say there was no time, then the men couldn't have walked onto the bridge, obviously, and the bridge couldn't have experienced their weight, obviously. I asked for example outside of time that can have a causal effect within it. Yeah, well, everything in a spatio-temporal universe happens within time, obviously. But when we look at per se causality, it's always simultaneous causality. That's what causality is, properly speaking, strictly speaking. There's a loose, we can talk very loosely about other kinds of causality, temporal causality, mediated causality, accidental causality, accidentally ordered causality. We can talk loosely about causality in all those different ways, but per se causality, strictly speaking, is essentially ordered. My response to Dr. Satan, they might be on that particular bridge because of any number of accidental causes, but the essentially ordered series are what we analyze when looking for immediate per se causality. The past does not come into it, and neither does the future. Time exists, obviously, but the past causes do not have immediate effects. Otherwise, they would be present causes. The past causes do not have immediate effects. Otherwise, they would be present causes and subject to atemporal analysis, right? So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Is the past cause present? If it is, it's not past, it's present. Is the future cause present? If it's present, then it's not future. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, well, we need time because the past affects the present. Well, the past affects the present accidentally. It doesn't affect it in a per se causality. Dr. Satan responds, per accident causes in time. What about ones which aren't in time? It's not a coincidence that the bridge lowered when the man traversed time and staved to step on it. And I asked one example of an action outside of time, which is an effect within it. No one says the effect of past cause must be take place immediately after the cause. But if the action took place in the past, that's still within the temporal order of causality physics. Yeah, well, go get a book on physics and mechanics in particular, and learn how the past does not affect the situation. Past causes do not affect the current situation or analysis. If it is immediately affecting it, then it's not mediated. If it's immediate, it's not mediated. This is not hard to understand. If it's immediate, it's not mediated. I said, you are not getting it. Go and study mechanics, and you'll see that past causes are not immediate causes. And if they are, then they are present causes. And only present causes are considered in any essentially ordered series. I don't know how else to say it. He responds, any past cause has occurred in time, obviously. So has any present cause, obviously. The words past and present lose their meaning entirely when time doesn't exist. Well, I didn't say time doesn't exist. Time does exist. What about that doesn't make sense to you? Well, it doesn't make sense that you don't realize that the past is gone and the future is not here yet. I asked for an action outside of time that has an effect within it. Well, there's only one action outside of time that has an effect within time, and that's the supernatural realm, right? Like my will, my soul, my mind, these are supernatural. Now I'm a creature in time, but there's a supernatural, my soul is supernatural, my mind is supernatural, obviously, or it would be subject to cause and effect according to the laws of nature, like every other material substance, and I would not have free will, but I do have free will. So we have God, we have the supernatural, we have these things that are outside of time, presumably. Now, God for sure. Now, is my soul outside of time? I would say yes, but that's a hairy question for another day. Let's just leave it at God for now. So my answer to his question is, we live in time. Causality is always simultaneous. Every member of accidental causal and accidentally ordered causal series. Every member is also a member of an essentially ordered causal series. I'll explain it during your live stream. He says, I know we live in time. Everything you have said relates to time existing. Of course, still waiting on that example of an action outside time that can cause effect in time. Provide an example of an essentially ordered non-temporal series, which isn't just logical sequence. Well, every effect is part of an essentially ordered non-temporal series. So you want one example? How about when I'm speaking right now? Is that a good one? Or what are you doing right now? Okay, so that's an example. Okay, what are you doing now? Okay, that's another example. Like there's no shortage of examples, right? Look out your window. There's an example. Look on your desk. There's an example. Everything is an example of an essentially ordered series with a non-temporal analysis because it's simultaneous, and with one and only one atemporal, non-temporal first efficient cause, which everyone calls God. Period. I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm just telling you that that's the truth. Go and learn about the first efficient cause. My response is there's one and only one atemporal first efficient cause, and we call it God. The other members of every essentially ordered series are all temporal and belong to accidental causal series too. Now there's that one exception, maybe with the human soul, the human will, free will, human mind and soul. We'll have to go and learn exactly what the relationship is between our supernatural souls and time, given the fact that our soul is the form of the body. I'm going to have to go and learn about that. Per se causality is always simultaneous and always has God as the atemporal first efficient cause. This is the modal proof of the existence of God. And you can look up Blessed John Duns Scotus's modal proof if you want to learn it. He says, that's your belief. I don't see any verifiable evidence for its existence. Absolutely everything is verifiable evidence for its existence. Everything. So to clarify, you cannot provide an example of an action that takes outside of time which has an effect within it. Yeah, I do have one example. God. I don't see how per se causality being simultaneous helps your case. Well, it helps my case because per se causality being simultaneous allows us to bracket out the irrelevant accidental and accidentally ordered causes. And then we see that because the effect is manifest, it is necessarily true that it is formally possible for an atemporal first efficient cause to exist. And since it cannot be brought into existence therefore it is necessarily existent. It necessarily exists. This is the modal proof. Larry's not married, blah, 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 happily simultaneous, Larry. I'm specifically asking for examples outside of time. How can Larry take the action to move through time space? He's completely missing the point here. Stop running and just answer the question. Can Larry change his state from bachelor to married if there's no space-time which we're going to move through? I never said there's no space-time. I've always said there is space-time. We are temporal creatures in a temporal creation. Okay? If so, what action can he take if time doesn't exist in order to become married? How dim of wit are you? How many times do I have to tell you that time does exist? My response to him is, at every moment in time, there are a vast number of essentially ordered... I just cut and paste this from something that I shared with someone else by email. At every moment in time, there are a vast number of essentially ordered causal series acting simultaneously everywhere in creation. These essentially ordered causal series can be formally distinguished from and conceptually isolated from all accidentally ordered causal series, as well as from all accidental causes. We know with certainty that each and every one of those essentially ordered causal series terminates, in the upward direction, in a first efficient cause, which is not an effect of a cause in that essentially ordered causal series, although it may well be an effect of any number of accidental causes and accidentally ordered causal series. We know this because an infinite essentially ordered causal series would imply that there is always lacking in each member of that essentially ordered causal series a sufficient condition for the effect, which effect is plainly manifest. That's why it's an a posteriori proof and a strict demonstration of the necessity of the first efficient cause. Now, since it is a necessary truth that it is formally possible, and formal possibility means not repugnant to being, since it is a necessary truth that it is formally possible for one of these first efficient causes to act atemporally, and that's why we bracket out the accidental and accidentally ordered causality to realize and to come to understand that it is a necessary truth that it is formally possible for one of those first efficient causes to act atemporally. And we don't even need an example. That's the funny thing. We just need to know that it's possible. It's formally possible. I don't even need to give you an example. We just need to know that it's formally possible. And that's why looking at the simultaneous causality, per se causality, is so important, because it shows us that it's formally possible. I don't even need an example. It just shows, just by looking at causality, we know that it's formally possible, and therefore, because it can't be brought into existence, we know with certainty that there is an atemporal first efficient cause. This first efficient cause is what I and the vast majority of monotheists throughout history call God. So that's basically a rough summary of Blessed John Duns Scotus's modal proof for the existence of God. I'm not expecting Dr. Satan to just grasp it and say, oh yes, of course. You have to think about it. You have to play with the ideas, massage your brain, think about causality, think about the distinctions that are being made, the subtle distinctions that are being made. I'm not saying it's easy, but invest some time. If you're interested in causality, invest some time and think about it. Don't ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT has zero intelligence. It's not sentient. It only reflects the intelligence of the human programmers, and it's not infallible. I'm sorry. He says we aren't talking about in time. We're talking about an action which takes place outside of time that has an effect within it. You have yet to give an example. Well, I don't need to give an example. It's formally possible, and because it can't be brought into existence, it is necessary that it exists. Absolutely all of your examples have the action take place in time. What action can be taking place if time doesn't exist? Well, the creation of creation is eternally willed by God. If you're if you're asking, that's the answer. How do you know nothing can bring into existence an atemporal cause? How do I know that? What how do I know that nothing can bring into existence an atemporal cause? That's a good question. That's a good question. How do I know that nothing can bring into an existence an atemporal cause? Well, because the thing about causality is it's simultaneous, it's not mediated in time, and we know that there is a formal possibility, it's formally possible that there's an atemporal first cause, and it is the first cause. It's not the second cause, it's the first cause. It is uncaused. That's how we know that it can't be brought into existence. It's self-existent. It's not the second cause, it's the first cause. Right? That's the whole point. If it's not the first cause, then go back further till you get to the first cause. That's the first cause. You're literally arguing that something did and it was your God, but now you say it's not possible for that to have happened. Now you say it's not possible for that to have happened, but you can't provide evidence for your claim that it's impossible since you haven't experienced how things work outside of time. So that's another of your unverifiable beliefs. No, it's we are forced by reason. When we look at causality, reason forces us, without any faith-based beliefs, reason forces us to admit that there is one and only one uncaused first cause. And we don't need evidence beyond the spatio-temporal evidence. We don't need to peer into eternity. We just need to know that the contingent implies the necessary. And this modal proof shows us how reason forces us to believe that. Although this one makes less sense as it's somewhat backwards special pleading fallacy. Nothing can make an atemporal existence except my God. If we grant that it is possible for an atemporal causes to exist, then it's not necessary for there to be a God who can do things which isn't possible. But again, you can't prove that it isn't possible. You can only believe it isn't. Then trying to establish why it was necessary of being is another thing you will fail to establish. If you haven't been outside of the universe, you have no logical basis upon which to claim that certain things out there can only be done by beings. Okay, so that's really painful to read the way he's phrasing this, but I think what he's saying is that, I'm just making it up and it's just a belief. And hey, there's my friend Christian Lowe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Dr. Satan, what you're missing, Dr. Satan, is that I'm not lifting the veil and seeing God and he's the first cause. No, what we're doing is we're looking at causality, and we are forced by pure reason, by the light of natural reason, without recourse to faith, we are forced to conclude that there's one and only one uncaused first cause. It's pure reason, okay? And God is a mystery, obviously. Free will is a mystery, obviously. Life is a mystery, obviously. These are profound things that we don't comprehend. But we are forced by reason to admit that there is one and only one uncaused first cause, period. Because in the essentially ordered causal chain of cause and effect, we know that the effect is manifest, and we know, therefore, that it's formally possible that there's an atemporal first efficient cause. Because, like I said, and you asked, well, how do I know it can't be brought into existence? Well, because if it were brought into existence, then it's not the first. It's just logic. It's just logic. I don't want to repeat myself and say over and over and over again, but that's it. It really is that simple. You need to humble yourself and just admit that, yes, I can't posit an infinite chain of essentially ordered causes and effects, because then The effect which is manifest, which I'm looking at right now, with the effect that I'm analyzing in that essentially ordered series of cause and effect. As I ascend in the hierarchy, the logical hierarchy of cause to effect, all the way down to the effect that's manifest here. When I analyze that, if I want to say that it goes on indefinitely, then I'm saying that there's something always missing from each and every member of that series. Something missing which is manifest. It's manifest, but it's missing? No, that's a contradiction. So it's an ad absurdum, a reductio ad absurdum proof. The effect is manifest. It's an a posteriori proof. That's how we know that there is a first member in that series, that essentially ordered series, period. Logic is forcing you to admit, if you have your wits about you, if you're humble enough to admit it, it's forcing you to admit that there's one and only one uncaused first cause. As I keep repeating, you have no logical basis upon which to claim things outside the universe. Yes, I do. It's a reduction to absurdity proof that there's one and only one essentially ordered, one and only one first efficient cause. Words like first directly relate to time. No, when I say first, I'm talking about in the logical hierarchy of the essentially ordered simultaneous series of cause and effect. When I decide with my will, free or not, with my will to push a stone with a stick, my will or my decision or whatever you want to call it is higher than the muscle movements in my arm which push the stick, and my muscle movements in my arm which are superior and more perfect than and higher than in this particular example than the stick, and the stick is higher than the stone, and so on and so forth. Okay, down the hierarchy to the actual effect, the stone moved. Okay, and if we analyze the statics of that, you'll see all the vectors. You won't see the human will, you won't see God in the analysis. You'll just see the force vectors. Okay, but we can even as an atheist physicist, we can say which one is which in the hierarchy. Whereas if there are a bunch of boulders knocking humans over like dominoes, the boulder in the hierarchy of that essentially ordered series is more perfect. It's more perfect. It's higher in the hierarchy. So it's not that humans are more perfect than sticks and stones. It's that in every hierarchy there is an order. There's a logical order, and there's a dependence. And if it's a lifeless boulder that's knocking over a bunch of stiff humans like dominoes, and they're falling one upon the other, whatever, as the boulder impacts the first human in that domino setup, the boulder is higher in the hierarchy. So we don't need to get hung up on the perfection of the cause, how the cause is more perfect than the effect. This is not the same hierarchy as when we look at the hierarchy in the animal kingdom or in God's creation, and where does Mary lie relative to the other saints and all these sorts of things. We don't need to enter into that discussion of perfection. We're talking about in a physical analysis of a hard science, when we look at causality with a cold, clinical, godless view. This is how it is. Okay? So don't think that I'm importing some sort of mystical perfection into humans when I talk about my will moving my arm and my arm moving the stick and the stick moving the stone. It could be the other way around. The stone could knock my hand, and then my hand moves my pencil, and then it causes the letter I or the letter J to appear on that thing. I'm not the top of that hierarchy. Okay? I'm in the middle of that hierarchy in that essentially ordered series. So don't get confused about that. I'm just anticipating that you might. We only know how things work in time. For all we know, outside of time, beings don't exist and aren't needed for intelligence and complex design. It could be possible for energy to come into existence from nothing on its own with no external input. Well, forgive me if I don't take your baseless speculation as the gospel. I have pure reason telling me there's one and only one uncaused first cause, and that's my God that I worship. Sorry, I'm not going to switch to your religion. We've proven that in this universe, quantum things can be in two opposing states at once. So what? In any external system, that could be the norm. Could be 13 different opposing states, properties is the usual instead of on or off. Well, this is fancy language, and this is, when it comes to quantum physics, there are very few things that are so reliable as quantum physics. It's a true science, it's a hard science, and all the woo-woo and all the philosophical interpretation, Schrodinger's cat, and all these sorts of Copenhagen interpretation, that's a bunch of woo-woo nonsense, and you can buy into that false philosophy if you want to. I don't. Okay? There's no contradiction possible. The principle of causality holds universally. The principle of sufficient reason holds universally. No exceptions. So if you want to buy into some new age, new physics nonsense, go ahead. The books are for sale at your local bookstore. They're best-selling books. Go ahead, join the cult of nonsense. Okay? Trust the experts. If you want to trust the experts, go ahead. I'm not gonna buy into their nonsense. There could be far more complex logic gates. The arrogance of pretending we should be able to understand things completely beyond anything we are physically capable of. You literally believe the only possible solution is that there was some magical being outside the universe that looks just like us. Was out there on its own feeling lonely. Well, God is pure spirit. The uncaused first God just doesn't look like us. He looks like us when he took on our flesh, but that's a separate conversation. Once you have the faith, we can discuss that. Once you're a monotheist, we can discuss the Christian faith, I should say. This infinite God-man then decided the best course of... Why is he talking about faith-based beliefs? I have no idea. The best course of action will be to create a flawed, finite, imperfect creation and to watch and collect admirable samples of these weird, finite beings to worship it for all time. Why are you ranting on about Christianity? There's no need for this. Your biased and silly view of Christianity has no place in this discussion. There's no reason to think that any words or concepts possible in our universe could even come close to describing whatever is out there. So if you want to say, okay, if you want to say that, logic is arbitrary, the laws of thought are arbitrary, non-contradiction and excluded middle and so on and so forth. If you want to just say these are just arbitrary things and whatever, good luck with that. You say goodbye to natural science. Kiss goodbye to natural science. It's a joke. You can't argue for multiverses with different logic. They all have different logic and different laws of nature and all these sorts of things. You can't, because there's always going to be an interface. There's always going to be an interface. And so if you have 16 different logics, that's what logic is. That's what logic is, and they all interface. They all interact. Okay? And have you ever heard of Occam's razor? If you want to make up a fantasy land that has no bearing on this universe, then go for it. And that's called insanity. That's called just living in a fantasy. My God, I'm forced by reason to believe in my God and to therefore to worship my God because of reason, because of causality. You have no excuse. You have no excuse. You're making stuff up and you have no excuse. I'm not making anything up. I was forced to believe in the uncaused first cause, and because I recognize the fact that this uncaused first cause is infinite in every pure perfection, including intellect and will, I worship it. It's my creator, literally. Okay? So I'm not making anything up. I'm submitting to reason. I'm submitting to reason. God is reason. God is wisdom, God is love, God is life, God is truth, God is identical with all of his attributes, and all of his attributes are identical among themselves. You're making stuff up, right? You have a silly religion. I don't have a silly religion. I have monotheism, which is purely and 100% reasonable, zero faith-based beliefs whatsoever. And then on top of my monotheism, I've taken the leap of faith into Christianity. But, if I didn't understand history, I could have been some other kind of monotheist, right? And even if I'm a Christian, if I didn't understand authority, I could be some other kind of Christian. But I do understand history, and I do understand authority to the extent that I'm able to make the leap of faith into the fullness of Christianity, which is Roman Catholicism. Okay, so this is going on quite a bit here. Your argument is the childish insistence that it wouldn't make sense otherwise, and it just absolutely has to make sense. Essentially, an argument from personal incredulity, logical fallacy for all explanations, bar your God, that you and many theists automatically apply in response to anything that challenges your beliefs. You're just making stuff up here. No, reason forces us to admit that there's one and only one uncaused first cause. Think about causality. Think about essentially ordered causality. Think about it. Go away and think about it. I've given you the outline. Now just go and think about it. That's what I did. You have no logical basis to do so. Yes, I do. It's pure logic. There's no faith-based belief involved in my monotheism, my classical theism. None. None. I was a generic monotheist when I decided reluctantly to take the leap of faith into organized religion. Okay, and I had to study something other than philosophy to take that leap. I had to look at history. I had to look at authority. Logically, there's no logical reason to think our logic applies beyond the universe. And there is logical reason to think it doesn't. No, there's no logical reason to think that it doesn't. Because like I said, our logic is manifest, and the other logic that you're imagining isn't manifest, and even if it existed, it would be part of logic. The other logic that you're imagining exists, but you have no proof that it exists. If it were to exist, it would be logic. It would be logical, and it would be connected with our logic. It's just part of our logic. It's if there are little green men on Mars with a different logic, if it's to the extent that it's logic, it's my logic. It belongs to me. It's part of my universe. It's part of my and when I say universe, that includes all your multiverses, all your fantasy verses, everything, every fantasy that you can come up with. They're part of my world, my universe, because uni means one, okay? All your speculation is just so much nonsense. You're just avoiding looking at causality because causality points to the one and only one uncaused first cause, which everyone calls God. So I say, to wrap up, the modal proof is an a posteriori proof that there is one and only one atemporal, supernatural, first efficient cause. I'll walk you through the proof step by step on the live stream. And it goes on. How long is this going to go on? Again, you somehow don't understand that you're talking about the within time frame of reference. A posteriori, Latin for from the latter, is a term from logic which usually refers to a reasoning that works backward from an effect to its causes. Yes, we look at the effect which is manifest, and we bracket the essentially ordered series of causality, and we ignore the past, which does not exist any longer, and the future, which has not yet come. And we realize that because there is necessarily a first member, and because it is not repugnant to being for that first member to be atemporal, it is necessarily the case that there is one and only one atemporal first efficient cause. Okay? Once more, the only thing you have relates to causality. Once more, the only thing you have relates to causality. The relationship between cause and effect within our three-dimensional universe with our set of laws, logic, mathematics, and physics. Like, do you really think there are different mathematics that contradict each other? Don't be ridiculous. They all interface. All of the mathematics, to the extent that it's true mathematics, belongs to me. It's my mathematics. You can compartmentalize it, and it gets applied in different ways in different places. That's fine. Same thing with physical analysis. There, the quantum world and the world of relativistic world, they are the same world. Hello, and we can use the same math. It's not easy, but you can use the same math. You can use Newtonian physics to analyze the quantum world. You can do it. We did it in physics. When I studied physics, we did it. And we used quantum wave equations to solve macro, real life objects like baseballs flying through at 100 miles an hour, flying through as the pitcher pitches the ball. We've done it. It's one math. It's one math. It's one physics. Okay. They're not separate worlds. I'm sorry. It's one world. So go study physics. Once more, you're saying these laws should apply outside our temporal three-dimensional existence. I never said that. I never said that the laws of physics they don't apply outside of the universe. I never said that. No, the laws of physics apply to this created natural world. That's what physics means, nature. That doesn't have time. I actually expect an answer to this question. Why do you think our logic should apply beyond our 3 dimensions? Well, why do I think logic applies beyond 3 dimensions? I've already answered that. Because if you're trying to say there's some other logic, some other worldly logic, it interfaces with mine, and so it becomes part of mine. Considering the arguments I've provided above, which you've ignored entirely, well, it's so much stuff and nonsense, and I don't have time to, or the desire to enter into a long, protracted debate in the comment section. I made that clear. Book a live stream and we'll talk. I say to him, look up the principle of proportionate causality. The cause is always more perfect than the effect. I'll explain during the live stream. Book it ASAP. He says, look up something about how logic works in our universe, still ignoring all my points. I'm not inclined to live stream with someone who repeatedly ignores everything I say. Well, I ignore the stuff and nonsense because it's just like you've ignored what I've said. I've said that the essentially ordered series is per se causality and that we have to bracket out the temporal mediated causality. Which part of that didn't you understand? I said, I don't engage in protracted and deep philosophical arguments in the comment section, bud. Face-to-face, man-to-man, verbal communication is the way that you and I can confront each other meaningfully. ChatGPT can't help you, but I can. Yeah. Grow a pair and come and talk. He says, Dr. Satan says, that's a fancy way of saying you make arguments in the comments and completely ignore the rebuttals. Every argument you could think of would fail to prove our logic works outside the universe. Well, you're the one that keeps talking about logic outside of the universe. We don't need to speculate about logic outside of the universe. We just need to use logic in this universe. Because of Occam's razor, we don't even need to, we can bracket out all the other kinds of logic. We can bracket them out, and Occam's razor suggests that we bracket it out. And I concede, I say basically, yeah, book the live stream to talk face to face like humans. So I'm basically admitting that, yeah, I don't pay much heed to this nonsense in the comment section. It's actually because you can't refute any of my arguments as you think what you've been doing thus far is engaging in protracted and deep philosophical arguments, but you haven't. You've just been insisting the laws of logic here must apply everywhere, and you don't have a single shred of credible evidence that suggests that humans also right to communicate. Yeah, that's not my preferred form of communication. I have a YouTube channel and a live stream. That's how I do it. I should like to think that a man who believes a God, no, I don't believe a God, told some men to write a book should understand that. I don't believe a God told a man to write some books. I said, you can tell me that to my face on a live stream. I'm nothing if not persistent. I could, but since you haven't shown me the courtesy, I haven't shown him the courtesy to you expect from me, I won't be joining you. You couldn't refute my arguments. Well, yeah, I can refute your arguments, and that's what I've done. I'll do a meta episode all about your arguments in the comment section then. And he says, or you could just address them. LOL. You did everything in your power to not address them, and you're still running from them. I'm running from the red herrings that have nothing to do with it. Like your ChatGPT thing was garbage. Your talk about there might be another fantasy world with different logic, that's garbage. I run from that. I run from that garbage because it's garbage. It frightens you to know that your logic won't apply to any system external to the universe. Well, I say that all logic is my logic. All logic is my logic. All truth is my truth. Okay? And I use Occam's razor. Until you can show me this other logic, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. If it does exist, it's connected. It's connected. It's all connected. I just said again, I don't do protracted arguments in the comments. I do live stream content. He says you couldn't refute them if you tried to anyway, so it makes no difference where you try. What you do in the comments is display hypocrisy, just like that Nicola guy. Hey, leave him alone. You provided arguments you expected me to address, but you refused to show me the same courtesy. I addressed every argument you provided me, but you ran like a coward from absolutely all of mine. No, I presented you with the fact that causality, per se causality, is simultaneous, and you came back with ChatGPT saying that it's not. ChatGPT is wrong. I'm right. I'm a human being, and I'm right, and ChatGPT is wrong. Okay? Watch me, I said. I've watched you fail to address my arguments and ignore all the evidence. This is getting really redundant here. You have a provider, which means you've committed an invincible ignorance, logical fallacy. You've lost, David. Oh boy. All those internet points down the toilet, I guess. I'm going to read all of your comments and respond to them on a live stream soon. Hopefully this coming weekend. Stay tuned. And don't say I didn't warn you. Oh God, this is getting tiring. I'll be very interested to see how you prove that our logic applies in any external system. I never said that, but I mean, logic is logic. It's going to be tough to do without using the logic that we can only prove applies within our universe. I expect all you'll end up doing is pretend that your beliefs are fact. No, we don't use beliefs. We use reason, and we conclude that there must be one and only one first cause. Okay, uncause first cause. I said you'll have to wait and see what I do. What we will see is you using some logic which we know applies inside the universe, and then you'll just pretend as though it's a fact that it applies everywhere. Well, I'm in the universe using logic in this universe. I don't know what you're doing. By doing nothing other than using definitions of words or referring to concepts that we understand within the universe, you'll waffle on somewhat eloquently, but ultimately all you'll be doing is citing your belief that things outside the universe must work in ways which are understandable within it. You'll fail to provide any proof. No, I've never talked about the logic outside of the universe, or I haven't even talked about the attributes of the uncaused first cause yet. That's a second step. Like we'll get there once you admit that there logically must be one and only one uncaused first cause. Once we get there, then we can do the second step, which is to talk about the attributes. Okay? So all your talk about logic and, you think there's some fantasy world where there's some different logic or whatever, it's completely irrelevant. We are using a posteriori proof to reason from manifest effects. And we're bracketing out mediated causality, which is only loosely speaking causality at all, because per se causality is always simultaneous. We're bracketing all that out, and we're just looking at causality and coming to the conclusion. There's no other conclusion to come to than that it is formally possible and therefore necessary that there is an atemporal first efficient cause. And I just ask him, have you ever been wrong before? Brace yourself. I have been wrong before, he says, but in order for me to be wrong this time, you'll need to have something more than just belief. Well, my beliefs don't enter into this. Or what seems logical within our universe. Well, what logic are you using? Because I'm using logic. There's only one logic. If you want to expand on it with some fantasy world logic and import that here, that's great. It will interface, it will connect, and it will all be part of my logic. Thank you for your additional logic. But in the meantime, I suggest you use the logic that you're familiar with here. I guarantee all you're going to do is use logic. Yeah. And word definitions, which apply within the universe. Well, what am I supposed to do? Enter your fantasy world? Will you be telling us about how you had some strange hallucination about leaving the universe? No, I'm using an a posteriori proof, looking at manifest effects and using pure reason. You're going to regale us with epic tales of how things function beyond our universe? No. Because if not, all you'll be doing is using logic, yes, which works in our universe. Yes. What did you expect me to do? And citing your belief? No, it's not a belief. There's no belief involved. There's no faith-based belief here. This is pure reason. And your belief that it must work outside of it? No, I'm not talking about your fantasy world where there's some other realm of some different logic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about our world. It's a spatiotemporal world. And if we look at causality in the spatiotemporal world using our natural God-given reason, we will be forced to conclude that there is one and only one uncaused first cause. Period. 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 All your red herrings are a waste of time. And why don't you just invest this time into thinking about causality? Because if you think about causality, you'll end up being a monotheist. And then come and talk to me, and I'll convince you to be a Christian. And then I'll convince you to come into the fullness of Christianity. I wonder if I can find something, a little something. Bear with me here, sorry. Uh-huh. Yes, 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 yes. I want to prove a little point here and read to you something that one of these bullshit, excuse my language, one of these demonic AI things spat out to me. Okay. It's I had to pay $3 for this, by the way. Well, 30 cents because it was you get 10 answers for $3. So I paid 30 cents for this. This is an AI service. It's called Philosopher AI. The causal link between two events must be simultaneous and not mediated in time. There are a number of reasons for this. One reason is that causation must be a simple binary relation. If there were some way of mediating the time between two causal events, then it would not be a binary relation. However, all causality is binary, i.e. one-to-one. In other words, if we have A to B and B to C, in other words, A causes B and B causes C, this does not imply that there are any ways in which A causes C directly or indirectly. Another reason is that causation must be a transitive relation. If there were some way of mediating the time between two causal events, then it would not be transitive. Transitivity requires transitivity. However, all causality is transitive, i.e. if A causes B and B causes C, then necessarily A causes C. The proof of this is simple. Suppose that A causes B and B causes C. So we have a chain of three causality relations. A causes B, B causes C. And then we add the additional relation C causes A, which means that there is some way in which event C causes event A directly or indirectly. This implies that events can be caused by mediating their time between two causal links. However, if events are mediated in time, they are not simultaneous. Some people might think that this is just a contingent fact about the universe. Ha ha ha. However, there are other reasons why causation must be simultaneous. Firstly, if time were to mediate between two causal links in any way, directly or indirectly, then it would be possible for a cause and effect to occur at different times. This is not the case since all causality occurs simultaneously. So if this were my student in Philosophy 101, I'd give him like a C minus. But at least he agrees that, there are reasons to posit that at least some causality is simultaneous, and all per se causality is simultaneous. Okay. So I just wanted to share that. I thought it was interesting that, if you want to ask GPT to write you an essay about why veganism is the best religion ever, it will give you some mediocre sounding text to argue that vegan is the best religion ever. If you want it to write an article about or an essay about how veganism is the worst religion ever, it will do that too, using fancy words. But if you want to have an actual discussion with a human being, then book a spot on my podcast and let's talk about it. Dr. Satan, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, book a spot on the live stream on my podcast and we'll talk about causality. And I'll explain to you time and time again, as often as I need to, that per se causality as such, strictly speaking, causality is always simultaneous. Because if it's mediated, it's not immediate. If the past cause is causing the present effect, then it's not a past cause, it's a present cause. So it's part of that essentially ordered series. I could repeat myself a million times with slight variations until you get it. And when you do get it, you will be forced by reason to admit that there's one and only one uncaused first cause, and that's what everyone calls God. And then we can go on to talk about the attributes and how we can know the attributes, that it's first in eminence and it's first in all these different ways. And there's a triple primacy, as Blessed John Duns Scotus says. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna leave it here. Just want to say hi to my friend Daniel Drazinovich. He's in the chat. Christian Lowe. Picris is in the chat too. Daniel asks, David, do you believe that we are not only a natural being, but a supernatural being? Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Our souls are supernatural. Picris says, LOL, ChatGPT, his prompt was probably, quote, Satan writes an angry letter to a Catholic. Excellent to see you, Picris. Hey, everyone in the chat, you're welcome to come book a spot and come and chat to me. Picris, I haven't talked to you in a long time. I'm curious how you're doing. Christian Lowe, it'd be fun to meet you, chat with you. If I haven't already, forgive me if I've forgotten who you are. And Daniel, as always, always a pleasure talking to you, my brother. So God bless you. Please pray for me and mine. Satan hates me and my family, and he hates all of us. So let's pray for each other, okay? So until then, take good care of yourselves. Talk soon. God bless.